Totem Park Residence houses over 2,000 first-year UBC students. It was named after an outdoor museum that from 1951 until the late 1970s displayed a selection of carvings representing styles of various First Nations across BC. In 1962, renowned carvers Bill Reid and Douglas Cranmer recreated a Haida village at Totem Park, which is now behind the Museum of Anthropology. The original 6 houses were named with the intention of honoring First Nations communities in BC. However, they were selected without consulting the communities that these names refer to. Many of these terms do not reflect the actual names used by the communities themselves. The newest houses, Hum Lasum and Kalachan, carry place names on Point Grey that are significant to the Musqueam people and are written to represent the unique sounds of their language, Hunk Aminum. Unlike the original 6 house names, the new names were selected by a collaborative community-based naming committee to represent local history of the Musqueam territory that UBC is located on. This film series features stories and sites that connect UBC to the communities represented at Totem Park Residence.
Asiam, Siam, Nasiaya, Aisak, Guanasqui, Tenitin, Kumasquiam. Clark, Sessioeners, Capalano, Coltimoto, Quis Helixtuch, the Queenas, Emigdaten, Quis to the Sans Tomokut, Kumasquiam. Sligus Theater, Guanasqueners, Helixtam. I tap Eos, Siam, Nasiaya, Aichka.
The name that I understand is on one of the housing complexes here at UBC is Kwakiutl, which actually is a misnomer. The correct pronunciation is Kwagiul. And Kwagiul are just one of the 16 tribes of the Kwakwaka'wakw people. And so the word Kwakwaka'wakw actually comes from our language and means, literally translated, Kwakwala speaking people. And Kwakwaka'wakw is actually a really modern term that our old people came up with because I think their feeling was they didn't want to be called Indian, they didn't want to be called Native, they didn't want to be called First Nations or Aboriginal. We're Kwakwaka'wakw. So the old people gave us that word so that we could refer to ourselves that way. So we're standing in front of my grandmother's Victory Through Honor totem pole, and you can see from the designs on the pole, there's a Thunderbird at the top. And the reason why she wanted this totem pole to be placed here at UBC was because the athletics teams were already calling themselves Thunderbirds. And she really wanted them to have that name legitimately through our traditional system. So what she did was she consulted with our family members, which included Chief William Scow, who would have been one of her uncles, and talked about creating a pole that's based on our family legend. So the legend of Tsequme is the legend that she drew from in order to create this pole. The legend of Tsequme, which means Cedar Man, comes from our Kwikwasutinook, or Guilford Island side of our family. And so it's really fitting that that particular story was adapted for this particular pole, because the story talks about how Tsequme was put through many tests. He was cut into pieces and thrown into the fire. He was had rocks and boulders attached to his legs and thrown into the ocean. And so he went through these different trials, but he always returned victorious, and he always overcame all of those challenges. So it's a really wonderful story about the human condition and about meeting great challenges and still continuing on. So we were really happy to learn about the legend many years later and find out that that's what she had in mind when she made the pole. My grandmother, Ellen Neal, her Kwakwala name was Kakasolas, which means people came from all directions to seek her advice, and which was a really fitting name because she was trained by my great-grandfather, her grandfather, Charlie Yakudlas James. And even though it wasn't typical for women to be carvers back in that era, she was one of the oldest children in the family, and so she was taught to carve. So she did make a living off of carving and continued pretty much through her whole life being a carver. Back in 1948, when this pole was originally carved, my grandmother, along with Chief William Scow and the late Judge Alfred Scow, when he was still a student here at UBC, presented the pole to the Alma Mater Society, and it was during the halftime at the homecoming game. And we thought that was really wonderful to hear about that as well, because everyone got to see and hear how the name Thunderbird came to be attached to the UBC teams. So I think that UBC is really fortunate to have probably the first example of a really good exchange between First Nations and non-First Nations institutions on mascot names.
Well, I thought it was really interesting when I saw the pictures of my parents and Alfie Scow, Chief Alfred Scow, was there as well representing the Tribal Council. And I looked at the date on it and I went, oh, this was all done in 1948 and I was 1 year old, the baby of all the Neal children. But I look at it and I think, okay, now it's 65 years later, and I know a great purpose for offering that pole to the university, and my mother's heart was for this university to open their doors and be welcoming to Aboriginal students. And she had a great love and passion for all people, and she believed that we all needed to work together to come to the future that we're at now.
Ladies and gentlemen, in our way as Aboriginal people, when we go into somebody else's territory and our intentions are peaceful, we usually ask for permission from the people who own that territory for permission to come ashore. So today, on behalf of our family, we're asking the Musqueam people for permission to come into your land and do the thing that we have to do. I'm sure this was done when the first pole was raised, but we just want to make sure to do it again.